On June 12, 2011, two divers were re-entering a flooded Soviet nuclear base near the small Latvian village of Vainode. After diving the site and entering one of the missile silos, they decided to resurface and return later that day with a third diver. The three divers would enter the water and proceed to dive to a maximum depth of 34 meters, but only two of them would return.
Gerai, jeigu ten nereikėtų tam virvėm kabarotis.
Ne, aš tai norėčiau. Todėl, kad mes ten panersim.
Panersim.
Born at the height of the Cold War between the US and Soviet Union, the Vainode Nuclear Base was erected in the middle of a dense Latvian forest, far away from any civilian road or city. Since there were no large towns or villages nearby, it was the perfect place to construct a secret underground military base containing multiple nuclear missiles. In the late 1950s, at the height of the Cold War, the United States began to build nuclear-capable underground military bases, and the Soviet Union, feeling the need to also maintain its military's nuclear quick-strike capabilities, proceeded to do the same in the strategically located Baltic states. In early September 1960, the Soviet Union started the rapid construction of one of its first underground military bases in the village of Vainode, in what was at the time the Latvian SSR. Sitting at 160 meters or 520 feet above sea level, this location was chosen for its height, as it would allow the nuclear missiles to reach Turkey and all of the surrounding EU-NATO members. Because of this, it became an extremely important military site. The former military base contained a network of intercontinental nuclear missiles, and a bunker with a command post, always at the ready to launch the devastating firepower of the R-12 nuclear warheads hidden beneath the surface. It became a strategic army compound for the Soviet Union and an important military airport in the Baltic region, which was only abandoned in 1993. But due to the heavy cost of the Soviet-Afghan war that ultimately led to the demise of the Soviet Union, after 12 years of operation, the site was eventually shut down and abandoned. On June 18, 1978, the nuclear-capable missiles were removed from the site and shipped back to Russia. During this time, the base was not maintained, with snow and heavy rainfall leading to the eventual flooding of the former military base, which was now part of the government-run Latvian state forestry enterprise. Despite the fact that this is a potentially dangerous site, access to the site was not limited to the public, and there was no fencing or warning signs in place. This oversight would lead to a terrible tragedy.
Ar porą dienų reikia pabūti, jeigu plaukai paskutiniai nenuslenka, galima drąsiai ne.
I want to start this section off by saying that, while I try to maintain a very detailed account of the stories that I cover, for this particular story there was little information to go on, and even though I had some communication with people close to the accident, there is still a lot of details that is unknown, and because of this there is no traditional timeline of events. On June 12, 2011, two Lithuanian divers set out to explore the recently discovered Soviet military base that had been flooded. Although the first dive was successful, the second dive ended in disaster. On the morning of June 12, 2011, Aidas Genetinovicius and Vitis Vilkas would enter the abandoned Soviet military base located near the small Latvian village of Vainode for a short dive. This was supposed to be a routine dive, as they had been diving at the site just a week prior, on the 4th of June. In which they recorded video inside of the now defunct military base. In the video, you can hear and see the apprehension of some of the members of the group about the potential dive inside of the abandoned base. Although judging by the other videos on their YouTube channel, this wasn't their first dive in such a structure. The group knew of not only the traditional dangers that awaited them, but also the potential radiation and other chemicals that may have been left behind when the base was deserted. At the end of the video on June 4th, you can hear them joking about the fact that if they didn't lose any hair after the dive, it would be okay to return, which they eventually did. The group enjoyed the initial dive and the challenges that the military base's labyrinth of rooms and tight corridors posed on the divers. They wanted to explore more of the empty but flooded missile silos located deep inside the structure. The gear they brought to the dive were light and simple. The pair wore safety helmets and brought smaller side-mounted cylinders, as they knew that portions of the base was only partially flooded, and they would have to take off some of their gear to get through some of the tight restrictions and crawl spaces before making their way to the silos. The first silo was one of the shallowest, and they reached a depth of 24 meters or 79 feet, looking at old Soviet technology and remnants left behind. The pair explored for a bit more before deciding to resurface. While back on top, they decided that they wanted to share this experience, and so they made a call to their friend, Linus Jaksters, and asked him to come join them on the dive. It's unclear whether the divers refilled their cylinders, grabbed new ones, or reused their old cylinders, but from what I gathered, they were diving on regular compressed air, and from what I could find, the divers didn't plan or do any decompression stops. Soon after Linus arrived, the three friends put on their gear and re-entered the base. They dove and marveled at the Cold War technology under the water, making their way back to the silos, but this time venturing deeper into the other silos, to a maximum depth of 34 meters or 111 feet. After spending time in the silos and enjoying the striking environment, they decided it was time to head back up as they were starting to run low on air. But on the ascent back up to the surface, Aidas and the group were run into trouble after kicking up the large amount of silts that now lined the floor of the base. While the military base is a man-made structure, it still offers some of the dangers of traditional cave diving. Lining the floor of the base was a large amount of silt due to the soil and sediment that came from the forest that surrounded the base, seeping in with the snow and rainwater. This caused very fine particles of silt to engulf the floor. Once kicked up, visibility could quickly be reduced to zero, and due to the base having zero flow, a potential silt out could last days, if not weeks. While all three divers were experienced and usually followed normal cave diving safety protocols, including the unwritten rule of buddy diving, they unfortunately forgot or ignored a few of the 5 basic rules of cave diving during this dive. Considering the tight corridors and maze-like layout of the site, against their better judgment, the group decided to dive inside of the silt-covered base without a guideline. And after reviewing the video of the original dive on June 4th, there is a big chance that the group may have also been diving with only 1 flashlight each, and not the required 3 flashlights for a typical dive. As this was supposed to be a short dive, the divers also didn't plan out their dives, and due to the silt being kicked up and the irregular shape of the rooms, the divers got separated from one another and got lost trying to find the way back out. And what was now considered a full silt out in one of the larger rooms, the divers had to find their way out of the base not knowing which way led to the exit. They began to feel around in the heavy silt for any doorway or exit, trying desperately to find the way out. But under these conditions and without a guideline, it was an extremely difficult task. After some searching, Vitas and Linus were able to find the correct exit and resurfaced in time. But Aidas, who was lost and potentially disoriented due to the extremely poor visibility created by the silt, had a hard time finding the exit. And in the end, when he didn't find the exit in time, he ran out of air and drowned.
Bet vaizdelis tai pasakysiu.
Besides the lack of a guideline and overall planning of the dive, the other potential factors of the accident could have been what's known as repetitive diving. Repetitive diving is any dive you make before you completely off-gassed from any previous dive. Basically, it's when your body isn't giving enough time to release the nitrogen bubbles trapped inside your body from the first dive out of a series of dives. This means that divers who plan to do multiple dives in a single day need to calculate their dives differently, as they must account for the nitrogen bubbles already in their bodies. They would usually do this using a repetitive diving chart and calculating their RNT, or residual nitrogen time. While easily overlooked, repetitive diving can cause the early onset of some of the issues associated with diving, especially on regular compressed air, to happen much quicker than expected on the second and consequent dives. Although I don't know if they went past their no deco time or if they even had one on any of the dives. It's hard to say if they even calculated or knew it, as they didn't really plan anything for these dives. Aidas' body was recovered from the base, with his official cause of death listed as drowning. Although some of the former Soviet nuclear bases were turned into museums, the Vainode Nuclear Base is still desolate, and from what I could see through recent pictures, is still easily accessible to the public and still lacks any fencing or warning signs about the site. A lot of the other nuclear bases in the Baltics were eventually closed before becoming museums, and now feature museums with guided tours where tourists can go to the underground labyrinth of silos completely free of water. In these museums, they can learn about the importance of the bases, how life was at the base during the height of the Cold War, and the consequence of a nuclear strike. This was not the case for Vaiņode, and none of the museums make any mentions of Aidas or the tragedy that occurred in the Vainode Nuclear Base, of the life that was lost during what he and his group of friends thought was just another interesting dive to reminisce about. And while some may criticize the decision to go diving without a guideline, or even to go diving at the abandoned nuclear base at all, the facts remain that people's natural curiosity mean that many will still explore these type of structures. And while Aidas may now be gone, he is still very fondly remembered and missed by his friends and family. Thank you for watching.